Welcome to the second episode of How the Hell Do You Build Every Single Unit in Honkai Starbucks in 2025. This time we have with us the Order of Preservation, all for the Ember Lord, all for the Ember Lord. As you guys can see over here, this is most likely gonna be a pretty straightforward video, which we only have our three main characters over here: Gepard, Xuan, as well as Aventurine. We do have two other units that's not gonna be displayed over here, which is gonna be Fire MC as well as Preservation March 7th. But who wants to know their build? Okay, no one? Okay, so we're just gonna continue. So with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into one of the OG units of all time, Gepard. You basically build him exactly like how you would build Aventurine. So we're just gonna slap on the regs over here and just jump straight into Aventurine himself, which is going to be over here. So this is the Aventurine build that I'm personally using. The key difference between Gepard and Aventurine is that this should on Gepard should always be defense percentage, whereas for Aventurine, I actually gave him imaginary damage boost to boost up his damage just by a smidge little bit. And then for this one, you want to change this to energy regeneration so that your Gepard can actually get a shield up as much as often as possible. And then for this one, defense is going to be fine, and then this one for speed boost is going to be fine. So everything else is pretty much exactly the same. A little bit of a baseline for your preservation units, which is going to be your, your tanks, right? Your night class units. Your night class units, they are the units that can keep your team alive, not by healing them, but by basically shielding for them, right? Either in the form of a shield or taking damage in their state, which is why they are the night class DPS. So Aventurine itself, I feel like it's gonna be an excellent example of what preservation is really all about. A little bit unfortunate that, Honkai Starbucks doesn't really have that wide of a roster for preservation units, but luckily for us, okay, bro, just chill. Luckily for us, all the preservation units kind of follows the similar formula, which is to be tanky enough to survive all of the hits, right? So for Aventurine, you have basically two different routes. One route is to run this on a full DPS build on the 4-piece debuffer, 2-piece. This can be Broken Kill, this could be Sao Soto. Me personally, I don't really like Sao Soto. I do like to keep this a little bit more of the damage for the entire team. Or if you want to, you can also run this on a 2-piece Durant. 2-piece Durant for a little bit of a follow-up into crit damage. That's going to be fine. I do believe that you can also consider running this with Valerius, because technically Valerius also has the ultimate damage, which is it's not that bad, but the attack is completely wasted. Me personally, I will just stick with the diver and just call it there, since you have probably been farming this for Acheron for almost your entire life. So that is gonna be there. For the build itself, you do want to try to focus, at least for the DPS build, speed and double crit to the point where you can achieve 100 minimum 134 effective, so that you can get at least the 2 actions on the very first wave, because otherwise Aventurine itself cannot really generate that much values outside from the getting higher than this. It's basically impossible to run a 200 speed Aventurine, unlike the abundant sustains that I've covered in the previous topic, because for abundant sustain you can in fact go very high up on your speed stats, but for your DPS, like mainly all of our preservation sustains, they can't really go that fast, right? So 139, anything above 134 is going to be completely fine. Just make sure that you do get the additional action. And then for Aventurine itself, he does have the ability to deal a decent chunk of damage, but keep in mind that it's not going to be that significant, right? The difference between a DPS Aventurine as well as a sustain, like a full-on sustains, full-on preservation Aventurine, most likely you're going to be losing out maybe like 20-ish, 25% DPS, but the thing is, his damage himself is just really not that high to begin with. Most of the damage you're going to be seeing him from dealing, they are probably coming from Bubbin. They are probably coming from 3B. Hell, they might even come from like a DPS link shot, right? So the damage is probably not going to be that significant. As long as you have the additional damage provided by your other support units, then his role is going to be more or less filled. For me personally, I just didn't really find any need to run the full tank build, which is going to be the 4-piece night set, which Gepard also uses for a little bit more defense, as well as the 2-piece, either Broken Kill, either Luxaga, if you want to run that. Any of these can also work. But for me, I don't really find the sustain option that needed so far, right? Or at least not to that degree anyways, right? If you do want to run the sustain option, then you run the 4-piece knight. This should be a defense percentage main stat. This should be a defense percentage main stat. Always energy regeneration rope, and then this should be the speed boost. So that is for the defensive option to generate as much shields as possible for a team so that you can basically survive, right? The good part about running a defense-focused Aventurine is that you should be almost fully skill point positive. because that is sort of the whole point for Aventurine to be running a full tank build. You don't really even want to use a skill at all, because if you reach a point where you need to use a skill, then you might as well just use a DPS build, because this shield is very, very thick, right? A full defense Aventurine should provide you with enough shield just from the talent alone, so that you can be fully 100% skill point positive and just give it to the rest of the teammates, right? So that should be a consideration. So if you can't even sustain, or rather you can sustain without using your skill, then running a DPS Aventurine, in my opinion, is going to be quite worth it, just for that little, because 1% is 1%. Right? As you guys have seen from a lot of my shorts nowadays, 1% is going to be considered 1%. So that is pretty much going to be it. Other than that, I don't think there's too many things to talk about. The tracers, why you can just kind of max out everything. If you don't really use the skill that much, you can even consider not raising the skill. But that's pretty much it. And this brings us to the next preservation unit, which in my opinion, I still think she is like really, really fucking good. My waifu. Yep, this is a 10,000 HP Xuan with 122 speed, 1.5k defense, or no energy regeneration aside from the signature Lycon, right? So the reason why I'm running this build, there are basically two schools of thought for Xuan right now. One is gonna be the waifu, right? Giga chonkers, giga big, and then just run her as slow as possible. Or you can run the traditional Fu, where you have a decent amount of speed and then try to balance out the HP and the defense. Ideally, this defense should be a little bit higher so that we can get a little bit more defense subsets. But, you know, if I'm gonna, I like seeing this 10,000, right? It's just a very nice number for me. So that's pretty much it. So the build itself is gonna be the 2-piece Longevous Disciple, as well as the 2-piece Watering Waves, as well as the 2-piece in the middle. It can kind of be ending. I feel like at this point, you guys can kind of get the point. The 2-piece in the middle, they can really just be depending on whatever team comps they're gonna be running, right? So if you're gonna be running crit DPS, Broken Kill is fine. Hypercare, you run on Rushaka, it's also fine, right? If you want to run Vulnerable, it's not going to be that ideal for your sustains. Or if you want to run the 2-piece Fleetless, even for DOT, that's also okay. So it really depends on team comp. But I do say that the 2-piece Watering Waves and the HP is going to be the most important, but especially this 2-piece Watering Wave, because it does reduce damage taken by 8%. And I'm pretty sure any of you guys that have been farming Quantum for like the first 6 months of playing Honkai Starbucks, you would have definitely gotten a decent number of Watering Waves where you can get a, maybe ideally a little bit of speed roll, a little bit of defense roll, a little bit of HP roll. You can see that my Watering Wave set is really nothing too crazy. I don't really have anything that is like out of the world. I have a lot of double crits on this. Holy shit. Bro, I have 2 double crits on Watering Waves. Damn, that's kind of crazy. And then this is going to be otherwise with HP, defense, about speed. So just finding a couple of defensive subsets would be more than enough for yourself. And you can see over here, we only have like, what, 2 effective rolls on the speed. This is going to be 1 roll on the defense and 2 rolls on the speed. This is going to be my HP with like, you know, very, very average rolls, right? Nothing too crazy. These boosts are basically completely fucking useless because I didn't roll a single defense percentage at all, or even a flat defense or effect res, right? So generally, nothing that is going to be considered as substat dependent. So anything that you can find, you can just slap it on and she's good to go, right? As long as you have the Quadra HP main stats, she is literally good to go, right? So this Xuan, I feel that from my experience using her, she has been way more useful than I could have ever imagined. Perhaps a little, she has basically saved my life more times than global passive. And I didn't even prove a global passive, right? So she has pretty much phase tanked every single AoE that this game has thrown at E. This could have been like the Nicador Sword. This could have been the fucking space, the bug out of space throwing out the giant AoE, Yanqing slamming down, you know, Kafka's AoE. Every single massive AoE, this 10,000 HP Xuan has basically helped us tank through it, right? So I personally run this build, don't really see too big of an issue. If you do find yourself lacking a little bit of skill points, because technically if you were to run the fast Xuan, which is changing to speed boots and running a little bit more, the balance itself doesn't matter, right? It's just a matter of, do you want to run speed boots and energy regeneration rope, right? That's the only concern. If you do change the boots to speed and the rope to ER, you can technically cycle a little bit faster. You can spam my ultimate a little bit faster, as well as getting that skill point back a little bit faster. From what I've experienced, the reason why my runs would fail with Xuan is not really because I was lacking skill points, and it's not really because I needed my ultimate to do toughness, break damage, or refresh Xuan's Matrix of Prescience. It's more so she just gets one shot because I couldn't do my DPS check or the mechanics check on the endgame enemy. And if the guy is just gonna consider doing the one shot, my team just wipes, right? Even from my Xuan being at full HP, she's gonna wipe. So ideally, I want to just keep this as beefy as possible while slowing the speed down, so that even if I were to fail the DPS check or like the mechanics check for any of the endgame content, Xuan with 10,000 HP, she is still pretty much going to be standing there unfazed, maybe a little bit phased. And then the moment she goes down to like a very low HP, a major oppression should proc, and then she's just going to just go back to full, right? So me personally, I do like this wide full build. If you want to run a speed build, that's also okay, because you do get additional benefits of dealing more toughness bar damage to all enemies, as well as a little bit more of the skill point generation, because it's technically a little bit faster, but she's ultimately not going to be too fast anyways, because you still want to focus on being on HP as well as defense, right? Honestly, this defense, it could have been higher. You can drop this down to like 9k and 2k. That might have been a higher effective HP, but I just have to say this number being 10k, right? So it's just a little bit illogical. That's pretty much it. In terms of the light cones, this is honestly a pretty decent light cone. I think I said it myself as well. Every single state here is going to be usable, as well as a quality of life where you have this thing over here, which is going to be quite useful in SU. If you don't want to run this, a lot of reservation light cones can be very good. This is for Aircron mains. This is honestly a very, very good alternative. One of the best. It's basically like Adamant Shield. Alright, it's basically Aureus from Epic 7. Almost everyone can run this. You can also consider running this if you really wanted to. But technically this is like the substitute for Aventurine. But, you know, Xuan can definitely still work with a defensive light cone, so that's fine. As long as it increases the effective HP, it's going to be good enough, right? The Eidolons, nobody cares about this. I personally think they're pulling for an Eidolon just for 30% crit damage in this day and age. Not worth it whatsoever. At least make it res pen or something, right? So that's that. And then this is for people that want a free glow passive. So that is pretty much it for Xuan. And with that, I think we sort of really covered, yeah, pretty much every single preservation unit so far. I can just touch on a little bit of, I guess, March 7th, as well as Fire Trailblazer. Okay, let's just be real. All right, let's just start with you. Let's start with you, right? Okay, nobody uses preservation March 7th. All right, nobody uses preservation March 7th. But if you really want to use her, you can just run her with speed, defense. All right, basically kind of like a Gepard, almost exactly like Gepard now that I think about it, and a little bit of EHR for her to land the freeze. Yeah, that is pretty much it. So if you want to run Mark 7 in this day and age, that would be a build. There you go. Energy regeneration rope, defensive main stat, either defensive main stat for your chest, or you can run an EHR main stat for your chest, then always going to be speed boost, and then hunt for the defensive subset, and then it's going to be fine. But I genuinely have not heard of a single people using Mark 7, preservation Mark 7 in the end game, so that's going to be there. And then the other unit is going to be the ancient OG Belabogu. The Belabogu person, right? Preservation Fire Trailblazer, right? Back in those days, we called her FMC, right? We didn't call her by HMC or PMC. This was FMC, right? Fire MC. All of a sudden, by the time Panagreen rolled around, suddenly instead of saying IMC, she's now called HMC. And now it's RMC, right? So, you know, the internet just changed. But yeah, this used to be FMC, Fire Trailblazer. Good old times, right? She got stabbed and then she revived. Unfortunately, she's basically like the downgrade of Xuan if you want to run her with an Aircron team. I don't even know if people still run with Aircon teams, especially for those with Jiaoqiu, because unfortunately the trend of Universal Market, it doesn't stack well with Jiaoqiu's shield unless they hit you with the second attack, which is like super niche scenarios. So yeah, you can technically run her with like the trend of Universal Market, exact same build like your Gepard, right? More speed, more ER. If you want to run break effect, I mean technically it's possible because the basic attack technically does a decent chunk of break the bar, but I really just would not recommend it. So yep, that is gonna be that for pretty much every single one of our preservation units. Unfortunately, this video is going to be a little bit short because we just don't really have that many preservation units to work with. General rule of thumb, stack on the health and defense, less focus on speed compared to abundance, and then maybe a little bit more effect resistance, especially because you don't really want them to be crowd control. But luckily for us, our Aventurine gives us 50% effect rest. Xuan is the get out of jail free card. Gepard is just Gepard, so yep, that's pretty much it. Well, of the day is gonna be wide. Join Twitch, join Discord, join Twitter, all the best. See you guys next time. Take care.